Unfortunately, there are people who do terrible things and think they can get away with it. But they don't. Sooner or later, they will be caught. My wife had an impeccable alibi, and in general, she did not give any reason for jealousy. But as soon as I noticed one strange detail, a puzzle formed in my head. Small details can often indicate problems in a marriage. The first sign of this appeared when I noticed that the hair on the back of her neck had become damp. I usually didn't pay much attention to this area, but the moment she slipped into bed, I wanted to hug her. When I reached for her, my hand accidentally touched the moisture, and I couldn't help thinking, what is this? That evening, she was at one of her monthly extended library board meetings, and I stayed up, looking forward to her return and hoping that we could have a pleasant evening. It's been a week since our last intimacy, but that evening I realized that there was clearly something wrong with my wife, and she was hiding something. My wife went by the name Mona. At 28, she wasn't conventionally stunning, but her remarkable physique compensated for any lack of facial attractiveness. I adored her. She was intelligent, had a great sense of humor, and I believed I could rely on her implicitly. She worked as an environmental biologist for the state's Environmental Protection Department. My name is Jim, 30 years old, a civil engineer employed by a consulting firm. Together we earned well and purchased a charming 3-bedroom bungalow in the suburbs a year ago. We met through our professional roles and immediately clicked. After dating for 6 months, during which we enjoyed a passionate physical relationship, we got engaged. A few months later, we exchanged vows in a church ceremony pledging fidelity, respect, and trust before God. We were both committed to building a family together. A week before, Mona had stopped taking birth control pills as it was her most fertile period. A year ago, when we moved into our house, Mona became friends with a neighbor named Sally, who was actively involved in local events. Sally, a single divorced woman about the same age as Mona, they quickly found a common language, often went shopping, and to the cinema together. I didn't mind when my wife went out with our neighbor because I was sure that everything was fine. Sally introduced Mona to the local library board, which initially held short monthly meetings. However, a couple of months ago, the meetings suddenly became longer, taking place twice a month, and each time for 4 hours. Mona explained that they were working on implementing a new computer system in the library to make it more interactive, and because she was good at computers, she was asked to collaborate with the head librarian after meetings to determine criteria for the system. This explanation seemed reasonable to me, so I did not attach much importance to it. However, I noticed that after the first lengthy board meeting, Mona was noticeably tense and distracted. When I asked, she mentioned that it was difficult to work with the head librarian and he required special treatment. But again, it didn't bother me a bit. And now back to her hair. Why was it a little wet that night? Judging by the humidity, she was either sweating or taking a shower somewhere. Why would she sweat or need a shower when she's supposedly in a meeting? I knew she hadn't showered or washed when she got home because I was awake and waiting for her. Sniffing, I smelled another soap, not the one she usually uses. Where could she take a shower? At the motel? My suspicious mood changed just as she started to pull away. Not today, honey. I'm too tired. The meeting was long. I'm exhausted and tomorrow we both have to go to work, she said. All right, honey, get some rest, I answered. After that, she moved to her side of the bed, turning away from me, and quickly fell asleep. It seemed strange to me that she didn't want intimacy because we kind of planned and were ready to create a full-fledged family. We wanted to have a child. However, I remembered her habit of avoiding intimacy after library meetings, citing fatigue. This reinforced my suspicions. Maybe she didn't want me to discover something that could give away her infidelity. Why did I think that she would cheat on me? Because I have no other justification for her behavior. We had been discussing the idea of starting a family. After 5 years of marriage, we decided to postpone parenthood until we were financially stable enough for my wife to stop working. Recently, I was promoted, and we felt it was the right time to try for a baby. So she stopped taking the pill a week ago. However, I couldn't shake off a nagging concern. What if things didn't work out between us, and I ended up responsible for child support? I needed to carefully consider my options. I lay awake for a long time pondering what to do next. The first immediate decision was to postpone intimacy with her. But how could I do that without arousing suspicion? It was a difficult dilemma. Presenting her with minimal evidence of infidelity would most likely lead to denial, and I would be in a vulnerable position. I needed to protect myself as much as possible. I needed more concrete evidence, which meant I had to buy time before we got close again. On the other hand, if there was a chance that she would get pregnant by someone else tonight, she could insist on intimacy this weekend to hide it. It was a difficult situation that required a careful approach. After carefully considering all the options, I finally settled on a plan of action that seemed promising to me. If she was really intimate with him tonight, then most likely soon after that, she will want intimacy with me. To make sure that the conception period was over, I had to be away for at least a week or more. Planning a business trip seemed to me the most appropriate way to assess her reaction. Although I didn't travel often for work, when I did, it usually lasted about a week, which could fit any scheme I developed. Now, what other information did I require? Ah, yes. Who was her paramour? How long had their affair been ongoing? Where did they rendezvous? If their encounters coincided solely with library board meeting nights, it could imply that her lover was a fellow member of the board. I had to investigate a few things, so I quietly left the bed and went downstairs where I located her purse. It was the repository for all her valuable belongings and seemed like a promising place to search for clues. While examining her credit cards, I came across one bearing her maiden name, Mona Spencer. It belonged to a bank we weren't affiliated with, prompting me to wonder why she possessed it. I had assumed she had disposed of all her pre-marriage cards. Evidently, she had held on to one. Delving deeper, I discovered a hidden pocket containing a business card belonging to Derek Matthews, the head librarian at our local library. Crap. The head librarian was male. She had led me to believe otherwise. Damn her. I examined the call logs on her cell phone and noticed Derek's number appearing frequently, indicating ongoing communication between them. It seemed to have been happening for some time. There were no instant messages suggesting they communicated verbally. Nonetheless, I returned everything to her purse and checked our computer for messages. I discovered she had an encrypted email folder, but I possessed enough knowledge to bypass her security measures and uncovered a substantial collection of messages exchanged between them, dating back to when she began attending late meetings with him. These messages revealed that they had been rendezvousing at the Red Roof Inn near the interstate junction. Some of their exchanges were explicit, indicating they had engaged in activities she had never participated in with me. I grew increasingly angry. In one email, they disparaged both me and his wife, although they claimed to love us. The more I read, the angrier I became. I copied all their emails to my own folder with the intention of printing them later, then proceeded upstairs to one of the spare bedrooms where my clothes were stored in the closet. This left the walk-in closet in the master bedroom for her belongings. I retrieved my suitcase and garment bag and began packing for an apparent business trip. At 5:30 a.m., I prepared for my journey and entered our bedroom. Mona, still groggy, sat up. "Why are you awake so early, Jim? And why are you dressed?" "I have a flight to catch, darling. I didn't have a chance to tell you last night, but I need to leave around 7. Work called me last night. They need someone to quickly survey some of our out-of-state projects. I'll grab something to eat at the airport, so don't worry about breakfast." She gazed at me, trying to comprehend what I just said. "All right, sweetheart, how can I reach you if I need to?" she asked, yawning. "Just call me on my cell phone. Goodbye, darling." I gave her a peck on the cheek and hurried downstairs with my bags. Suddenly, there was a thud behind me, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps. She appeared at the top of the stairs and called out, Jim, what about starting a family? We plan to discuss it this weekend. We'll have to postpone it until next month, darling. I'll give you a call once I reach my first destination." As I opened the garage door and got into my car, I heard a loud sob from behind me. I was already driving down the street before she could say anything more. After ensuring my cell phone was switched off, I headed towards the interstate. 2 hours later, I reached my father's retirement home situated by a lake in the remote countryside. Dad, a widower who lived alone, wasn't expecting me, but he promptly began preparing breakfast for us. While sipping his strong morning coffee, I shared the troubling news about Mona. Dad, who had always longed for a daughter and saw Mona as filling that role, was deeply saddened by her betrayal and couldn't fathom her actions. "Son, I'm at a loss for words. Your mother and I had a strong relationship, and to my knowledge, she never strayed. You'll have to navigate this situation carefully, without rushing into any decisions," he advised. "I understand, Dad. Tomorrow, I'll return to the city to consult with my lawyer, Ed Wiltz. I need to understand my legal options," I replied. "Ed is trustworthy. We've relied on him for years," Dad reassured. "All right, Dad. Your coffee is as great as ever and your omelets are unbeatable," I complimented. "Well, if you ever find yourself cooking your own meals, you'll have the chance to perfect your skills," he joked. "Got it," I chuckled in response. Around 9 in the morning, I phoned my office and spoke to my boss. We agreed that if Mona called looking for me, he would simply say that I was on the road, and they reached me on my cell phone. He even instructed the receptionist to provide the same story to anyone who called. I also requested a week's vacation, which he approved. When I checked my messages, I saw that Mona had tried to call me 4 times, asking me to call her back as soon as possible. I decided to let her wait a bit, so I waited until around noon to call her at work. She seemed a bit stressed when she asked about my whereabouts. "Where are you, honey? Is it possible for me to fly out and spend the weekend with you?" "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm leaving tomorrow, and I'm not sure when I'll have a place to stay for a while. Let's make plans for sure next month. Gotta go now. The guys are calling for me." After hearing her say, "I love you," I ended the call. My dad, who had overheard, simply shook his head. The following day, I phoned and scheduled an appointment with Ed Wiltz. The next day, I drove back to town for my appointment. "It's great to see you, Jim. So what brings you in today?" "Ed, my wife has cheated on me with another man, and I need to understand my legal recourse." For the next 30 minutes, we deliberated on the most feasible courses of action, and he suggested that if I desired a divorce, the easiest route would be to file on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. Pursuing a divorce based on adultery would entail the burden of proof falling on me, and obtaining evidence that would hold up in court would be very costly. With no children in the picture, and considering that my wife was a well-compensated professional, the financial aspect of the divorce would likely result in a straightforward 50-50 division of assets. I inquired about the possibility of her being pregnant by the other man, and was relieved to learn that I wouldn't be liable for child support. I expressed gratitude for his guidance and assured him I would inform him of my decision in a few days. After meeting with Ed, I went to the main library and wandered until I spotted an office door labeled Head Librarian. Grabbing a magazine, I settled where I could discreetly observe the door, waiting. About 30 minutes later, a man around my age emerged. He was unremarkable in appearance, blending into a crowd effortlessly. I pondered why she'd jeopardize our marriage for an affair with him. Having glimpsed the rival, I departed and made my way to the nearby electronics store, purchasing a pricey voice-activated recording device. Next, I checked into the Red Roof Inn where they'd been meeting, securing a room for the night. With time to kill, I slipped back home to check our PC. Their recent emails hinted at her anxiety over a possible pregnancy from their last encounter, as we hadn't been intimate to cover her betrayal. They fear he could be implicated for any resulting child. It was satisfying to see their concern. I copied the messages to my records and left. After dinner, I went back to my motel room and watched TV for a while. In the end, I turned it off and lay down on the bed, absorbed in thinking about why she did this to our marriage. As far as I knew, we had a warm relationship and we were planning a wonderful future together, including children and retirement. However, she decided to give it all up. Although our bed life was satisfactory, it did not have the spark that it had in the first years of our life together. Her reaction to my business trip suggested that she was pregnant by her lover. Her decision to give him preference as the potential father of her child made me question whether she had deep feelings for him, or whether there was a darker, more complex aspect of her personality akin to Jekyll and Hyde. Thinking about our life together, I couldn't help feeling sad and regretful about the 5 years we spent together and which now seemed to have been wasted. Although we had moments of happiness, the pain of our current situation overshadowed it all. I think I've come to understand that even if she hadn't gotten pregnant by him, I couldn't forgive her. Divorce seemed like the only option, but I knew I'd have to confront her first, and I wasn't looking forward to it. Around 8:00 p.m., I called home on my cell phone and spoke to her. She sounded like she had been crying, so I asked her what was wrong. "You don't sound well, sweetheart. Are you sick?" "Oh, Jim, I just want you home." "Well, I'll try to wrap things up quickly. Hang in there. Why don't you go talk to Sally? I'm sure she can cheer you up." I had a feeling that Sally might be involved in my wife's infidelity, so I had nothing to lose if they spent time together now. "Okay, honey, come home soon." "I love you." "I will, sweetheart. Bye." I hoped she noticed that I didn't say I love you when I hung up. That night at 11:00 p.m., I went to the motel office and encountered a young man working alone. I was relieved it was him on duty, as a female clerk might have been unwilling to assist me. After some casual conversation, I broached the topic and offered him $100 for assistance. Recognizing his likely modest pay, I hoped the offer would motivate him to provide me with a record of the times my wife and Derek had met at the motel. He agreed to look into the motel records, and I provided him with my wife's maiden name and the suspected start date of their meetings. I surmised they might be using the credit card under her maiden name, which I found in her purse, to avoid detection. He assured me he would work on it overnight and have the list ready for me by morning. I went to bed feeling low and had a restless night's sleep. I arrived at the office early and my colleague already had my list prepared, confirming my expectations. They reported back after the library meetings. When I showed him a photo of my wife, he recalled her because she had registered using her credit card. He mentioned that they typically only occupied the room for about an hour before departing in separate cars. He noted that this was typical of the numerous unfaithful spouses he had encountered. After breakfast, I returned to my father's house. The remainder of the week was spent fishing, and on Thursday, I phoned Ed Wiltz to request the initiation of the divorce proceedings. He assured me that he would have the papers ready in a few days. Each evening, I continued to phone home pretending to be in a different city, thus giving Mona the impression. She seemed increasingly despondent with each call, evoking a sense of pity within me. Yet I remained resolute in my determination not to release her from accountability. My desire for revenge was palpable, though tinged with a sense of bitterness. I returned home Friday afternoon while she was still at work. Based on their recent emails, it seemed the affair was winding down. The fear of her pregnancy had greatly affected their relationship. It appeared I wouldn't require the tape recorder anymore, so I could return it and reclaim my money. I had ample evidence of her infidelity regardless. I started printing 2 copies of their email exchanges. I felt Derek's wife deserved to see the documentation of their affair. My next choice would be whether to confront Mona immediately or wait until she confirmed she was pregnant. When Mona returned from work, she hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, Jim, I've missed you so much," she said. "My God, darling, what happened? Is the sink clogged up again?" I replied jokingly, "No, I realized how much I love you and miss you when you left. After we eat, I want to get you into bed and do what we've been planning for so long. If that's what you want, maybe I should leave more often." No, I don't want you to leave me again." "All right, honey, let's have dinner together and then go to our bedroom to indulge in mutual intimacy." "It sounds like a plan," she said, smiling through her tears. God, I felt like such a fool. I suggested to my wife to go somewhere, and we went to the nearest restaurant, had a quick snack, and went home. When we went up the stairs to our bedroom, she was running there at the speed of light. When I joined her, she was already lying on the bed. "Hurry up, dear. I'm already completely ready." I couldn't help but think, "I'm sure you're ready," while leisurely folding his clothes. Looking at her, I realized that I would miss her, but I wasn't going to let anyone else have her. She has always been exclusively mine, and I thought that she remained like that until now. But unfortunately, this was no longer the case. I knew that time was running out, and soon she would no longer legally belong to me. Almost reverently, I bent down and kissed her lightly on the lips. Then she took the initiative, and what she began to do was well described in her emails along with her lover. She obviously wanted to appease me. I decided to stop her and do probably the most terrible thing. I wanted to bring it to a climax and interrupt everything a couple of seconds before the end. Yes, I know I'm not the most original person, but I thought it was funny and appropriate for the moment. "Oh dear, you're great at this. No one can compare to you." She said it when I first started. I couldn't help but wonder how many other people she was comparing me to. Her compliments did not give me any pleasure. It didn't get out of my head that she had been cheating on me for months, and I was in the dark. I understood that she wanted us to have a baby that night, but I understood that this would not happen. But in the end, whether she was pregnant or not didn't seem to matter anymore. It was over, so I could have told her that. I sat on the edge of the bed and interrupted her at the very last moment. "Hey, what are you doing? What happened?" she howled. "Mona, we need to talk. The reason I stopped all this is because I can't stop imagining you with Derek." I heard her take a sharp breath, and when I turned to face her, she looked at me with an expression of horror on her face. "It's over, Mona. I'm going to file for divorce." She suddenly jumped up and rushed into the bathroom, throwing up. I heard it all very well when the world around her collapsed. Eventually, she stopped and tears began to flow from her eyes. I got up and looked into the bathroom. She was lying next to the toilet with her head in her hands. I left her there and went to another bathroom down the hall, where I took a shower and then went to the guest room to get dressed. Downstairs, I poured myself a drink and waited for her to join me. Most likely, she will try to save something from the ruins of our marriage, perhaps even try to dissuade me from divorcing her. But I was sure that everything was, of course. Seated in the dimly lit room, illuminated only by the glow emanating from the kitchen, I sipped my drink and contemplated the direction of my life. Despite my youth and the potential to build the family I yearned for, and despite the upward trajectory of my career, a sense of despondency lingered. The cessation of sobbing from the bathroom signaled her transition into denial, and I anticipated her eventual descent downstairs. Sometime later, I heard her coming down the stairs and saw her enter the living room, dressed in a bathrobe, and sit down opposite me. I reached out and turned on the light. "Are you ready to discuss this now? Are you ready to explain why you did this?" "Yes," she murmured. "To be honest, I do not know why. The first time we did this, I swore I wouldn't do it again. We started dating to have a drink after our get-togethers, and you know what happens to me after a few drinks. It seemed so tempting and sophisticated, and it got easier every time. I think hearing Sally describe what it's like to cheat on your ex-husband made me curious to try it. I should have realized that sooner or later this would happen to me since she had been divorced for a long time, and I, like a knave chicken, did not stop doing this." "Why did you do it the first time? Was there anything in our previous conversation where we discussed mutual loyalty, trust, and respect before we got married that you didn't understand? Or was there something in our wedding vows in which we promised to leave everyone else that you couldn't understand or didn't agree with? If you couldn't understand or disagree with something, why didn't you tell me about it? I've invested 5 years of my life in you, and now I have to look for another spouse. I hope I can find someone who understands the importance of marital fidelity. Oh, Jim, can't we find a way to overcome this? I love you. I don't want you to leave me. I want to have children with you. Please, honey. Let's get one thing straight. You no longer have the privilege to address me with tenderness. You lost this privilege the moment you found yourself in the same bed with him. Do you understand?" I was becoming increasingly frustrated with her demeanor. Despite the impending divorce, she remained in denial, but I made a conscious effort to maintain compulsory and take the moral high ground. "Regarding children, when do you anticipate evening out if you're pregnant?" It was the second instance tonight where her complexion drained, and she stared at me in disbelief as if she couldn't comprehend what she just heard. "Oh my God, she exclaimed. "Yes, I'm acquainted with Mona. You might wonder why I fabricated that business trip. It was to make you feel some pain. That's the main reason I'm pursuing a divorce. You intentionally sought to conceive a child with your lover. You were hoping that I would go to bed with you after a day has passed since you got pregnant by him, and then you wanted me to take responsibility for your lover's child. Well, that's not going to happen. What you attempted is one of the most disloyal acts a wife can commit against her husband. It showed a complete lack of respect for me. I can never forgive you for that, no matter what. Even if you hadn't done that, I might have considered forgiveness if it had been a one-time occurrence, but you persisted. You became addicted to infidelity, and no amount of therapy, even over 20 years, can restore my trust in you. Now do you have anything to say to justify your actions? No, she replied, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry. That's all settled then. I've started the process with Ed Wiltz to prepare divorce papers. They should be ready by Monday. We'll divide our assets evenly 50-50, and there won't be any alimony. Even if you're pregnant, I won't be providing child support. It won't be my child. Are you okay with this agreement? It seems acceptable. I'll consult with a lawyer before I agree, but it seems acceptable, she said tearfully. Very well. I'll sleep in the spare room until we formally separate. In the meantime, I'll search for an apartment. You can stay here and see your lovers once I'm gone. It's over between Derek and me. I gathered that from your emails. It's a shame you didn't end things sooner. Oh God, you've read our emails. Yes, and I've replicated those messages to bring to your lover's wife tomorrow, along with dates and times of your meetings at the Red Roof Inn. I believe she'll have some words for Derek once she's reviewed them. According to the motel records, you met there 13 times. You also used a credit card under your maiden name. It seems you held on to it from before our marriage, perhaps in anticipation of betraying me someday. It makes me wonder how many others there were before Derek. His wife deserves to know he could potentially face child support payments if you're pregnant. It will be your decision whether you pursue that. I suppose you couldn't keep him out of this. He has children. I don't think he should escape consequences just because he has children. I may still consider filing an alienation of affection lawsuit against him. Please don't do that. She had come to terms with the divorce now. Her tears had ceased and she was starting to think logically. We'll see. Is that all? No. Tomorrow, I'll go over and explain everything to your parents and your brother. I don't want you feeding them some fabricated story that blames me for everything. They deserve to know the truth about their daughter. And if you're pregnant, I'll find a way to inform your colleagues and our friends about what you've done to me. Oh God, she burst into tears once more. I stood up and went upstairs to bed. The following morning, I woke up early and left the house before she woke up, taking a copy of the emails and motel data with me. She had been crying most of the night and must be exhausted now. I grabbed breakfast at IHOP. Since I anticipated dining out more often from now on, I figured I might as well start getting used to it. Lazily sipping my coffee, I waited until 7:30 and then made my way to Mona's parents' place. Knowing they were early risers, I didn't think arriving early would inconvenience them. As I knocked on the kitchen door, I saw they were having breakfast and Mona's dad waved me in upon recognizing me. Stepping inside, they gestured to an empty chair at the table while Mona's mother poured me a cup of coffee. Why are you here so early, Jim? Would you like some breakfast? No, no breakfast. I've already eaten at IHOP, and I have some difficult news that I thought you should hear directly from me. Difficult news? I'm going to divorce Mona. Mona's mother let out a loud crash as she dropped the coffee carafe she was holding onto the tile floor, shattering it. Divorce? Mona exclaimed, stunned. Jim, are you serious? We were planning to start a family. I've discovered she's been having an affair for the past few months, and she might already be pregnant by her lover, Jim explained solemnly. Simon, Mona's younger brother, entered the kitchen, startled by the noise of the carafe hitting the floor, just in time to catch Jim's revelation. Oh, damn, Simon exclaimed, joining the shocked stares directed at Jim as if he had just announced the end of the world. Questions flew from all sides. Are you certain? This can't be happening. Where is she? Can't you work through this? Who is the other man? Jim did his best to answer their barrage of inquiries. Yes, I'm certain. I possess emails and motel records to corroborate it, and she confesses to it. To the best of my knowledge, she's currently at home unless she sought solace at her friend Sally's place. I don't see any way around this. I'm convinced she attempted to conceive a child with him and pass it off as mine. That's unforgivable for any husband. Her paramour is Derek Matthews, the head librarian. He's married as well, and I've heard he has children. Mona's mother sprang up and dashed to the phone. I'm dialing her right away. I can't believe that my daughter could behave so terribly. I hope you do, I replied. She's going to need both support and reproach, because I don't think she comprehends the gravity of her actions. She's not just shattered our marriage, but likely his as well. Mona must have still been at home because I heard her mother begin to question her as I got up. Mona's father took my hand, tears streaming down his face, and apologized profusely. I had a great fondness for her parents and brother, and it pained me to burden them with this news, but there was no way to soften the blow. I departed feeling saddened by the devastation this would cause so many people. I had learned where Derek Matthews lived and proceeded to his residence. Parking on the street in front of their modest bungalow, I approached the front door with the packet of data and rang the bell. Derek answered the door, tears evident on his cheeks as he looked at me. May I assist you? I wish to speak with your wife and give her something, Mr. Matthews. I'm sorry, my wife isn't available. Please give it to me, and I'll make sure she receives it. Mr. Matthews, I'm aware that Mona has informed you of my arrival. There's no way you can prevent me from delivering this information to your wife or speaking with her. I advise you to allow her to come to the door, or I'll proceed with legal action against you for alienation of affection. After a moment of hesitation, he turned away and called out, Marge, there's someone here to see you. Then, addressing me, he said, You scoundrel. No, Mr. Matthews, you're the one at fault for having an affair with my wife and attempting to impregnate her. You've shattered my marriage, and I aim to do the same to yours. With a sigh, he turned away from the door as his wife approached. Yes, she inquired, clearly puzzled by her husband's distressed state and my evident agitation. Mrs. Matthews, I have some unfortunate news to share with you. Your husband has been involved in a relationship with my wife for the past few months, and I'm in the process of divorcing her. I have evidence of their affair, including copies of emails exchanged between them, as well as a list detailing the dates and times they'd met at the motel. As I delivered the news, I witnessed a sudden expression of shock wash over her face as she tried to comprehend my words. Oh my God, are you certain? You can ask your husband, Mrs. Matthews. He's right behind you. She turned to face him, and he immediately broke down in tears. I'm sorry, Marge. I'm so sorry. Her complexion turned pale as she turned back to me, and I couldn't help but express my own regret. I'm sorry too, Mrs. Matthews, that we ended up marrying such disappointing partners. I'm also sorry for you and your children. You should be aware that my wife might be pregnant with your husband's child. I suppose we won't address that until it becomes a reality. Passing her the parcel, I informed her she was free to do as she pleased with it before departing. The sight of her looking dazed and sorrowful nearly broke my heart. I longed for a means to protect her from such anguish. Having accomplished my task, I made my way home. Upon arrival, I noticed Mona's absence, but I didn't bother about her whereabouts. Not long ago, I couldn't shake the feeling of incompleteness without her presence or assurance of her safety elsewhere. Now I felt indifferent. I changed into different attire and began mowing the lawn. Mona, despite the objections of her family, decided to terminate the pregnancy, which led to her significant estrangement from them. My divorce has been finalized according to my initial suggestion, leaving me single and in search of a new spouse. Having been betrayed by someone I once trusted implicitly, I'm grappling with determining the new criteria for selecting a partner. I started therapy and delved into research on psychological ethics, unsure if it will provide any guidance but remaining hopeful as I continue my search. I had another opportunity to seek retribution against Mona, 2 years post our divorce, I learned of her engagement and discovered the identity of her fiancé. After sharing with him my experiences during our marriage, he withdrew from the engagement. It was a minor triumph, and I have mutual acquaintances who will inform me if she attempts another engagement. Although the Matthews remain married, I've heard she exerts tight control over him. I suppose the presence of children can outweigh the desire to dissolve a family. I'm relieved to have learned about Mona before we began our own family. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.